A schoolboy builds a time machine by mistake. Toby adjusted his glasses and looked out of the classroom window. It was another gray, drizzly day in Manchester. If only something exciting would happen, like an alien invasion or a trip to the future. He knew that was silly, but he couldn't help dreaming of a world that wasn't so predictable. As if by magic, a bright light suddenly flashed outside. Toby gasped. Could it be an alien spaceship? He ran to the window and looked out into the street. There was a strange metal box with flashing lights. Toby ran downstairs, dodging people in the hallway, eager to get closer to the mysterious box. Had it been a dream? No, the cut on his knee was still there. And as he looked up, he saw a scrap of shiny metal in the gutter. It looked like part of the control panel from the future. Toby decided to show the piece of metal to his dad, hoping he could help explain it. He opened the front door and stepped out into the rain. But how could this be possible? He looked up at the sky, but there were no strange lights anymore. But as nice as Mr. Williams was, he, too, had no idea what the piece of metal was. Why don't we take this to Professor Elm? He asked. Professor Elmwood is the best in the business when it comes to mysteries like this. All he saw were the usual gray clouds. Suddenly, a blue light filled the room and the piece of metal in Toby's hand started to glow. With a jolt, Toby realized what was happening. This was part of a time machine. Would you like to see your piece of metal in action? Toby nodded eagerly. Well, this isn't just any time machine, it's mine. The professor winked. I built it myself. Building a time machine is crazy hard. You need tons of advanced tech and a lot of money. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen before. Your dad suggested that maybe they should take it to school. That's why you may have seen some strange lights outside. I was testing the device again after all these years and it seems to have worked, and asked Mr. Williams, their neighbor, and the local expert on all things technology. His mom called after him. Toby, what's all the rush? But he didn't answer. He was too busy pulling out his drawers and rummaging through his books. At first his mom didn't seem to say a word. Did she think he was crazy? But then she smiled. Of course he did, she said. You always were a dreamer. Sure, there were lots of cool inventions, but the biggest surprise was that people seemed just as happy and sad, angry and playful as they do now. Toby shook his head without taking his eyes off the pile of books. His mom came in. What's wrong? She asked. She knew that something had happened. Life isn't always as simple as traveling to the future whenever you want to. The future was a fun place to visit, but he liked his own time just fine. After all, it was his time. But when morning came, he woke up feeling happy and glad to be home. Traveling to another dimension isn't so different from traveling to the future. Toby knew he would never forget his adventures in the future. You just have to think of it as another world, the professor said with a smile. The box was about 4 feet tall with silver metal and dials and buttons all over it. Why don't you stay here for a few days and try to find out for yourself how much ahead of our time the future is? I'm sure you'll be surprised. But as soon as he touched it, the same force that had brought him here pulled him back down the shaft. Whoosh, he tumbled through the air and landed with a thud on the cold concrete floor. When it was time to go, the professor sent Toby back with a wave of his hand and a whirl of blue light. Toby reached out and touched the side of the box. Then suddenly, whoosh, he was sucked inside. Outside the hatch he could see not the familiar street outside his school, but a bustling futuristic city filled with flying cars and buildings that touched the clouds. Toby could barely believe his eyes when he saw a room full of televisions from the 1950s and a gramophone that looked like a spaceship. The professor himself was very friendly. Toby waited patiently, although he was beginning to feel that the professor might not know the answer either. People hurried around on foot and on bikes, all of them wearing strange clothes. Some of the people even seemed to have wings. Toby found himself lying on the floor in a dark, narrow shaft. When his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he saw that the shaft was filled with a swirling vortex of light. Above him was a hatch in the ceiling. He could hear shouting and alarms. Then suddenly, with a lurch, the hatch shot open and bright light filled the shaft. Toby shielded his eyes and squeezed them shut. When he dared to open them again, he was met by a dazzling sight. Toby had no idea where he was, but one thing was clear. This was the future. Startled by what he saw, Toby jumped back and accidentally kicked something. The object was round and metallic and made a loud clanging sound when it fell to the floor. As it turned out, it was a control panel for the shaft. In a panic, Toby scrambled to pick it up. Toby sat up and quickly looked around. Where was that strange box now? In its place was just an ordinary trash can. Toby got up and examined the piece of metal in his hands. This was real. It hadn't been a dream. Toby walked home slowly. He had so many questions. How did he get to the future? And why? What was that strange box? When his dad saw the piece of metal, he, too, seemed puzzled. Mr. Williams examined the piece of metal carefully. Toby could tell he was excited after all. He loved tinkering with new gadgets. Toby slumped down in a chair, disappointed. Was he just going to have to keep this mysterious secret all by himself? Suddenly, Mr. Williams brightened. The professor's house was full of strange gadgets and gizmos. When he heard Toby's story, he took the piece of metal and disappeared into a back room. After what seemed like hours, the professor returned. He had a big smile on his face. "I think I know what this is," he said. The professor led him back into the main room and pressed a button on a device that looked like a giant record player. The professor nodded. "This piece of metal is from a time machine, but how can you be sure of that?" Toby asked. Toby's jaw dropped. "But you built this yourself. How?" "I couldn't believe it." The professor chuckled. "I didn't build it to go to the future or the past, but to travel to other dimensions." "So you mean I traveled to another dimension, not the future?" Toby asked, disappointed. "Yes, but don't be upset, Toby." But Toby was still a bit disappointed. He wanted to see the real future. Then the professor had an idea, and so Toby spent 4 days in the future. To his surprise, it wasn't that different from the present. In the end, Toby felt more than ever that home was where he belonged. Whoosh Toby back to the present. He landed with a soft thud on the floor of the professor's basement. He was back home again. He thanked the professor for everything and raced home. Toby burst through the front door and ran to his room without saying a word. His mom knocked on the door. "Toby, what are you doing? Are you looking for something?" Finally, Toby looked up. "Mum, I traveled to the future," he said. She hugged Toby tightly. "I'm glad you had an exciting adventure, sweetie, but it's time to come back to reality now." Toby nodded. He knew his mom was right. That night, Toby dreamed of flying cars and strange, wonderful worlds.